Welcome to Learn Yourself. In this video, we are going to learn about Chapter 6, Life Processes from the Standard 10 Science. So this is an outline of the chapter. In this chapter, we are going to learn all these details. First, based on nutrition, we are going to learn about what is autotrophic nutrition, what are their modes, what is heterotrophic nutrition, what are their modes, and the last, which one we are discussing in detail, that is nutrition in human being. In that, specifically, we are going to see some of the processes in detail. These processes we already know, but we are going into depth and we are going to learn that how actually our body works. So it includes process of digestion in small intestine. Then second is respiration. Third is purification of blood in heart. And the last one is excretion. And in excretion, we are going to learn the functions of the kidney. So all these processes are very easy to learn because we already know these processes, but the detailings are very high into this. So in this video, I have tried that to simplify the details, and I have given the details in point-wise manner so that it will be easy for you to remember. So let us start our chapter with the topic that viruses are truly alive or not. Viruses do not show any molecular movement in them until they infect some cell, and that is partly why there is a controversy about whether they are truly alive or not. About viruses we have already learnt in 9th standard when we have learnt the function of the antibiotics, and we have seen that how the virus will infect the healthy cell. For example, let us revise that concept that this is a healthy cell and this is a virus. Once virus will enter into the cell, it will capture this cell and it will use all the metabolic process so that it can multiply. And until it will enter into a healthy cell, it will not show any movement, it will not show any sign that this organism is alive until it will get one healthy host cell. Once it will get into the host cell, it will use the host cell's metabolic process to multiply itself. So that's why there is a controversy about that whether viruses are living organism or not. Let us understand 2-3 points, and these points are based on why all these metabolic processes which we are going to learn are important for the body. So the first point is why living creatures must keep repairing and maintaining their structures. So because of the effect of environment, this organized order nature of living structure is very likely to keep breaking down over a time. If order breaks down, the organism will no longer be alive. So living creatures must keep repairing and maintaining their structures. Now this is depending upon life on earth depends on carbon based molecule. Most of these food sources are also carbon based. The process of acquiring oxygen from outside the body to use it in the process of breakdown of food sources of cellular need is what we call respiration. So these two processes are very important. All the metabolic process is very important for the body and it has to happen on daily basis. And why we required it? Because this is happening in one specific order, and if that order will not be maintained, then organism may die. So we required this to keep on going, and for that we require repairing and maintaining this process. And in these two main processes we required it, that first carbon based molecule we required for our existence, and the second thing is oxygen we required for our existence, because oxygen is the one breaking the molecule and give us energy in the process of respiration. Now second, why we required transportation system in body? Because all the metabolic processes is happening in one particular organ or in one particular body part. Now when the energy is generated in one particular body part, it has to circulate throughout the body, then only the body will work, and that's why we require transportation. So food and oxygen, whatever will be taken up by a specific organ, it has to circulate throughout the body. For example, oxygen will be in lungs, but our fingers required it, our legs required it, so it has to transport to that specific organ. That's why we require transportation system. And For the same reason, we required food transportation system also. The digestive system is doing its work, but our all body organs and body parts required energy, which we are getting it from the food. So that's why we require transportation system. Now, why the excretion is also important in the body. The waste byproducts are needed to be removed from the body and discarded outside from the body, and this process is called excretion. Let us start with our first process, and that is autotrophic nutrition. So autotrophs are using the carbon dioxide and water, and these two things they are converting into carbohydrates, and they are using chlorophyll and sunlight into this. Now whatever carbohydrates which are not used immediately, they'll get stored into the leaves into the form of starch. Now food we eat is stored in our body in form of glycogen. So this is a basic difference between leaves and our body system, that our body stores starch in form of glycogen, whereas the plants will store carbohydrates in form of starch when they are not using them. Now this is an equation that you have to remember, that when 6 molecules of carbon dioxide will react with 12 molecules of water in presence of chlorophyll and sunlight, these two will get converted into glucose, oxygen and water. Now the steps of photosynthesis. These are the three main steps in the photosynthesis process. That first, absorption of light energy by chlorophyll. So this is a function of chlorophyll. Then second, conversion of light energy to chemical energy, and splitting of water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. What is this? This is a water molecule and it will get splitted into a hydrogen and water molecule. So that is how the splitting will happen, and light energy, the sunlight, will get converted into chemical energy. And the third step is reduction of carbon dioxide to carbohydrates. Reduction means from the carbohydrates the oxygen removal will happen and the hydrogen addition will happen, and it will get converted into carbohydrates. So this process is a reduction. So three things will happen in photosynthesis. First, light energy will get absorbed by chlorophyll. Then light energy will convert into chemical energy and it will split the water molecule. Then third, reduction of carbon dioxide to carbohydrates. Now these steps need not take place one after the other immediately. It will happen whenever it is necessary. Step by step, this all the three things will not happen immediately. It will happen where and all it will necessary. So about this point, we are going to discuss more when we are going to learn about desert plant. Now let us learn some specific things about desert plant, that they take up carbon dioxide at night and prepare intermediate which is acted upon by the energy absorbed by chlorophyll during the day. Now chlorophyll is absorbing energy during the day, but it will absorb the carbon dioxide at night. So they will absorb the carbon dioxide at night, they will keep it to themselves, and then the further second step will happen in the day. And that's why we have discussed this in the previous slide, that all the three steps of photosynthesis will not happen one after another. It will happen as and when it will required. Now why this is a difference in desert plant? Because when this plant will take carbon dioxide, it also removes some of the water from the leaves. These are the stomata pores. When it is absorbing carbon dioxide, it is also leaving some of the water. Now for desert plant, water is very important. So if the stomata pore will open in the night time, then they will remove very less water, because at night time the temperature will be very less. So to prevent the transpiration water loss, they will absorb the carbon dioxide at night, and further processes in the presence of sunlight, that they will do it in the daytime. So in the cross section of leaf under microscope, some cells contain green dots. These green dots are the organelles and they are known as chloroplast. We have learned this in 9th standard, that chromoplast are having the chloroplast which are green in color and they are having chlorophyll into them. This chlorophyll is absorbing the energy, but this chlorophyll work at the daytime and the stomata will absorb the carbon dioxide at night time. Why they are doing so? To prevent water loss. Now let us understand how do plants take up their nutrition. So water from the soil by the roots in terrestrial plants. What all terrestrial plants are there? They are absorbing water from the soil via their roots. Now nitrogen, phosphorus, iron and magnesium, these four are very important nutrients for the plant and they are absorbing it from the soil. Now nitrogen is an essential element used in synthesis of protein and other compound in the plant. They are taking up this nutrition in the form of inorganic nitrites or nitrates, or it is taken up as an organic compound which have been prepared by bacteria from atmosphere. Nitrogen's absorption mode is little different compared to other nutrition because they are only absorbing nitrogen in the form of nitrates or nitrites, and these two compounds they are getting it from the organic compound or from the bacteria. Now let us understand the function of stomata, that opening and closing of stomata. Stomata, which are tiny pores present on the surface of the leaves. So they are tiny holes, and what is its function? The massive amount of gaseous exchange take place in the leaves through these pores for the purpose of photosynthesis. Gaseous exchange. What is the meaning of gaseous exchange? Gaseous exchange means the carbon dioxide absorption and oxygen removal into the atmosphere. This is a gaseous exchange. This both process will happen via stomata pores. But the exchange of gases also occurs across the surface of the stem, roots, leaves as well. Large amount of water can also be lost through this stomata, so the plant close these pores when it does not need the carbon dioxide for the photosynthesis. So this is the reason that why these pores are not open throughout the day. Whenever they require gases, these pores will get open, and whenever they don't require it, these pores will get closed, because this pores also leaves major amount of water into the atmosphere. So continuous water loss is harmful for the plant. So this should not happen, and because of that the opening and closing of stomata pore is very important. Now who will do this? The guard cell will do this. That whenever it will required, it will open the pore, and whenever it is not required, it will close the pore. So the opening and closing of pore is a function of guard cell. The guard cell swells when the water flow into them. Here you can see that into the figure that these are the guard cells, and it will swell. You can see it here, the shape, it has been changed because of the swelling of the guard cell. When the water flows into them, causing the stomatal pore to open, and as you can see, this is a pore and it has opened because of the swelling of the guard cell. Now when the water will rushes out, here there is no water and there is no swelling. Here there is no water, no swelling, and so pore is not open, it is closed. And here the pore is open. So whenever the water will rushes in, this guard cell will get swell up and the pore will get open. But whenever they don't require any gaseous exchange, the water will rush out, no swelling, and the pores will get closed, and it will prevent the water loss. Similarly, the pores closes if guard cell shrink. That means there will be no water. So that is how the guard cell will prevent the water loss from the leaves. Now comes the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Now fungi like bread molds, yeast and mushroom, they will break down the food material outside the body and then they will absorb it. So this is the difference, that they'll first break down the food material that happen outside their body and then they will absorb the nutrition from that. Some other organisms derive nutrition from plant or animal without killing them. This parasitic nutritive strategy is used by wide variety of organisms like cascata, which we call amarbail in Hindi, and ticks, leeches, lice and tapeworms. So all these parasites will absorb the nutrition from the host, but they will keep them alive. They will not kill them, so that they'll keep on getting the nutrition from the host organism. Now, under heterotrophic mode of nutrition, we are going to discuss two specific cases. That first is amoeba's case and second is paramecium case. Now, single cell organisms in which amoeba takes in food using temporary finger-like extension of the cell surface which fuse over the food particle, forming a food vacuoles. Now, as we can see into the figure that this is a food particle, then it will extend its pseudopodia. Pseudopodia means false arm, and then it will take the food particle into its cytoplasm and then it will engulf it. The inside the food vacuole, complex substances are broken down into simpler one, which then diffuse into cytoplasm. So this is the method by which it will absorb the food particle. First it will come into the food vacuole, then complex substance will break down into simpler one, and then it will get absorbed into cytoplasm. The remaining undigested material is moved to the surface of the cell and it will get thrown out of the organism's body. So that is how via pseudopodia the amoeba will absorb and take the nutrition. Then second, in paramecium, the cell has definite shape and food is taken in at a specific spot. Food is moved to this spot by the movement of cilia, which covers the entire surface of the cell. So this is our paramecium and this is a structure of cilia. So via cilia they will take the food particle at a specific spot and from there they will absorb it. Nutrition in human beings. Now from here we are starting the metabolic processes happen in the human body. The first one is nutrition in human body. So digestion process is starting from the mouth itself. The saliva is containing the enzyme and that is called salivary amylase, and it will break down the starch into the simple sugar. So digestion process starts from the mouth or buccal cavity. The food is mixed thoroughly with the saliva and moved around mouth while chewing by the muscular tongue, and that's why we say that we have to chew our food properly so that the saliva will thoroughly mix with the food. So the starch will break down into simple sugar. Now movement of the food. It is necessary to move the food in regulated manner along the digestive tube so that it can be processed properly in each part. So step by step it has to move. Now lining of the canal has muscles that contract rhythmically in order to push the food forward. It will not happen that once you will gulp the food, it will directly fall into the stomach. No, stepwise, in a stepwise manner, it will move forward. And how this will happen? Via this peristaltic movement. Now what is this peristaltic movement? As you can see here, the contraction is happening here while the food is here. Once the food will go down, the contraction will happen here. As you can see it here, the contraction will happen here. Now the food is here. After this, into the next step, the contraction will happen here and the food will go forward, and this is known as peristaltic movement. And this is rhythmic, this is stepwise. So in each step, the food will process properly, and once the process has been followed properly, then only it will move forward. So this process is very important and it is known as peristaltic movement, and that will happen all along the gut. So once the digestion process will start from the mouth, salivary amylase will mixed with the food through esophagus, it will come to the stomach. Now what will happen in stomach, that we are going to see it in this slide. So first the food will come to the food pipe and through esophagus it will come to the stomach. So once the food will come to stomach, the stomach will expand and digestive juices will mix thoroughly. Now once the food will come to the stomach, the gastric gland present into the stomach, it will release three enzymes. First, hydrochloric acid, second, pepsin, and third one is mucus. Now we have to see the function of all the three. So hydrochloric acid create an acidic medium which facilitate the action of enzyme pepsin. Now if the pepsin has to work, it requires acidic medium that will be provided by the HCl. So what pepsin will do? Pepsin is protein digestive enzyme. Into the stomach, the protein will get digested with the help of pepsin. Now this pepsin will work in acidic medium which will be provided by HCl. So HCl will facilitate acidic medium to pepsin. Now what is the function of mucus? That mucus protects the inner lining of the stomach from the action of acid under normal condition. So in stomach, the acidic medium will be there. So the inner lining should not be get destroyed by this acidic environment. So the mucus will protect the inner lining of the stomach. So mucus will protect the lining of the stomach. So that is how the complete process of digestion into the stomach will be completed. Now from the stomach, the food will come to the small intestine. Small intestine is a very long organ. It is fitted into a very small space because of its extensive coiling. Now what is the meaning of extensive coiling? This is a coiling, or this is also a coiling. So because of its coiling, the long organ has been fitted into a small space. The exit of food from the stomach is regulated by a splinter muscle which releases it into a small amount into the small intestine. Now what is a splinter muscle? Splinter muscle is a muscle which will send food part by part to small intestine. The whole lump of food which has been partly digested into the muscle will not go to the small intestine at once. It will releases to small intestine in small parts in small amount. Now this has been done by splinter muscle. This is a function of splinter muscle, that it will send the food in small amount. This is the longest part of alimentary canal which is fitted into a compact space because of extensive coiling. The length of small intestine differ in various animals depending upon the food they eat, because the different types of food requires different types of attention and digestive methods. Now first, the herbivorous eating grass need a longer, smaller intestine to allow cellulose to be digested. To digest a cellulose is complex process compared to meat. So herbivorous animals are having longer small intestine. Now whereas meat is easier to digest, and hence the carnivorous like tigers have a shorter small intestine. So this is the difference in the small intestine in herbivorous and carnivorous. Cellulose is difficult to digest, so that's why herbivorous animals are having longer small intestine, whereas carnivorous are having shorter small intestine. Now digestion process in small intestine is very complex. So I have made a chart over here which will be helpful for you to understand the whole process. You can write the whole process from this chart itself. So now digestion in small intestine, the digestion of carbohydrates, protein and fats will happen over here. It receives the secretion of liver and pancreas for this purpose. The food coming from the stomach is acidic and has to be made alkaline for pancreatic enzyme to act. Now the protein digestion happen in stomach. The pepsin enzyme will work in acidic environment. So the hydrochloric acid will give that acidic environment in stomach to pepsin enzyme. Now when it will come to small intestine, it requires alkaline medium, so the pancreatic enzyme will act upon the food particle. Now the first one is the bile juice from the liver. Now what it will do? It will break down the large globules of fat into the smaller globules. Then second, from the pancreas, we will receive the pancreatic juice. Into that, the trypsin will be there. Now what it will do? It will digest the protein and lipase for breaking down the emulsified fat. So from the pancreas, we will receive two enzymes. First, trypsin, and second one is lipase. Trypsin will digest the protein and lipase will break down the emulsified fat. Now walls of small intestine, it will secrete the intestinal juice. Now this juice will convert protein into amino acid, the complex carbohydrate into glucose, and fat into the fatty acid and glycerol. So you can see that complex process will happen in small intestine. That's why the small intestine is the large organ and it is called one. So how many enzymes or juices will mix into the intestinal food? First, bile juice from the liver. Second, the trypsin and lipase from pancreas. And the fourth one, the secretion of intestinal juice. And it will carry out the series of processes like breakdown of large globules of the fat, then digesting protein, then breaking down emulsified fat, conversion of protein into amino acid, complex carbohydrates into glucose, and fat into fatty acid and glycerol. So once you will remember all these things via this chart, it will be very easy for you to understand and remember. Now the inner lining of small intestine has a finger-like projection called villi, which increase the surface area for absorption. So whatever this digestion process happened till now, it has given us some of the nutrition. That nutrition has to be absorbed. So that absorption will be taken care by this structure called villi. The villi are richly supplied with blood vessels which take the absorbed food to each and every cell of the body, where it is utilized for obtaining energy, building up new tissue, and repair of old tissue. So this is the function of absorbed nutrition. And who will absorb all this nutrition in small intestinal wall? The finger-like projection villi will be there on the wall of small intestine. It will absorb all this nutrition. Now the unabsorbed food is sent into the large intestine, where its wall absorb more water from this material and rest of the material is removed from the body via anus. Now the exit of waste material is regulated by anal sphincter. So when we are talking about digestion process, our teeth are one of the most important thing to cover. So dental caries or tooth decay causes gradual softening of enamel and dentine. It begins with the bacteria acting on sugar produce acid that softens or demineralize the enamel. Masses of the bacterial cell together with food particles stick to the teeth to form dental plaque. Saliva cannot reach the tooth surface to neutralize the acid as plaque covers the teeth. So the brushing teeth after eating removes the plaque before bacteria produce acid. If untreated, microorganisms may invade the pulp, causing inflammation and infection, and it will develop tooth cavity. So that's why brushing the teeth at night is the most important thing which you can do to protect your teeth. Now we are going to the next important process, and that is respiration. So first thing which we are learning is pyruvate. This is the first step in which the 6 carbon molecule glucose break down into a 3 carbon molecule. This process is known as pyruvate. So here this process starts from the 6 carbon molecule of the glucose. We know it is C6H12O6. So it will convert into 3 carbon molecule, and this process is known as pyruvate. This happens in cytoplasm. So when it will convert into 3 carbon molecule, it also gives us energy. Now going forward, there will be 3 different processes. First, in absence of oxygen, this happens in yeast, that it will convert this 3 carbon molecule into ethanol, which is 2 carbon molecule, carbon dioxide and energy. Now absence of oxygen means this is anaerobic respiration, and which happens in yeast. So in anaerobic respiration, 3 carbon molecules will convert into 2 carbon molecules, and it will give carbon dioxide and energy. Then the second type of process is, once the pyruvate will happen, 3 carbon molecules will be generated when the oxygen is less in our body, in our muscle cell. Then it will give us lactic acid, 3 carbon molecule and energy. This type of process will happen when the athlete is running and it requires lot of energy in short period of time. So our body cannot consume enough oxygen or cannot take enough oxygen from the atmosphere. So this process happens in lack of oxygen, and this happens in our muscle cell, where it will give us lactic acid and energy. This process is very fast. Our body will generate energy in short period of time compared to the normal respiration, to support the faster metabolic process of the body. For example, athlete is running and it requires a lot of energy in a short period of time. So in that case, the glucose burning will happen in lack of oxygen. It will give lactic acid and energy. Now the third type of process, this happens in presence of oxygen, in enough oxygen. And this happens in mitochondria, where it will give carbon dioxide, water and energy. This is a complete combustion of glucose molecule, and much more energy will be generated compared to this type of process which produces lactic acid. So there are 3 different types of glucose burning. We are seeing it here. So first process we have seen here is pyruvate. What is pyruvate? In pyruvate, C6 molecule will convert into C3. Now going forward, this C3 molecule will get combusted in 3 different types of process. This too will happen in human and in presence of oxygen. So this is aerobic respiration, whereas this respiration is anaerobic respiration, which happens in yeast and in the absence of oxygen. It gives us ethanol, which is 2 carbon molecule, carbon dioxide and energy. Now 2 types of process which happen in human in presence of oxygen. In that, one happens with lack of oxygen and combustion of glucose molecule will be there. Whereas here the complete combustion of glucose will be there, and it will give us more energy compared to this lactic acid one. So these are the differences. When pyruvated, 3 carbon molecule will further get burned and it will give energy. So anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration, and under aerobic respiration there are 2 types of processes, with limited amount of oxygen and with complete amount of oxygen. Now energy through respiration. What all energy will be generated at the end of the combustion of glucose molecule, that energy where we are using in the body. So energy released during the process of respiration is used to make ATP molecule from ADP and inorganic phosphate. Now endothermic process in the cell then use this ATP to drive the reaction. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, which is energy currency for the cell. When terminal phosphate linkage in ATP is broken using the water, the energy equivalent to 30.5 kilojoule per mole is released. Now what is the use of ATP? So we are using ATP for various processes like contraction of muscle, protein synthesis, conduction of nervous impulses and many more other activities. Now how the respiration in plants will happen? that at night when there is no photosynthesis occurring, the CO2 elimination happens. So this is very important point here, that in the sunlight they will absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, but at the night they will eliminate or they will release carbon dioxide at night when the photosynthesis is not happening. Now during the day, CO2 generated during the respiration is used up for the photosynthesis. Hence there is no CO2 release. During the day, oxygen will be released, and during the night, the carbon dioxide will be released. Now in aquatic animals, what will happen? The rate of breathing in aquatic organism is much faster than seen in terrestrial organisms, because the amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air. They are saying here that oxygen amount dissolved in the water is very less compared to the amount which is present in the air. So that's why they have to breathe faster to fulfill their requirement of the oxygen. Fishes take in water through their mouth and force it past the gills, where the dissolved oxygen is taken up by the blood. And that's why their respiration process, breathing process, is faster compared to the terrestrial organism. Now lungs are a very important part of respiration process, and the reason for lung cancer here. So let us learn the reason for the lung cancer. The upper part of respiratory tract is provided with the small hair-like structure called cilia. So if these are the lungs, then on top of this surface of the lung, the cilia-like structure will be there, small hair-like structure will be there. This cilia help to remove the germs, dust and other harmful particles which we are inhaling along with the air. When the person will smoke, that smoke will go along with the air to the lung. Now, due to the germs, dust, smoke and other harmful chemicals enter the lungs, and it will cause infection, cough and even lung cancer. This happens only when there is a presence of smoke particle will be there into that. This happens when there is a presence of smoke particle will be there along with the air. So, smoking is the main cause for the lung cancer. Respiration. Respiration is a very important process, as it gives us fresh oxygen and it is responsible for the gaseous exchange happens in the lungs. Now, nostrils, passage, lungs and alveoli are the important parts who are taking part into the respiration, and they are responsible for the gaseous exchange. First, nostrils. The air passing through the nostrils is filtered by fine hairs that line the passage. So nostrils help to filter the air. Whatever the hair-like particles will go along with the air, that will get filtered into the nostrils. Then comes passage. The passage is also lined with mucus, which helps in the process. From here, the air passes through the throat into the lungs. Rings of cartilage are present into the throat. This ensures that the air passage does not collapse. So this rings, you can see it over here into the figure. So once the air comes down from the throat to the passage, these rings of the cartilage will help that the passage will not collapse and the air will pass part by part, and here the mucus will help air to pass through it. Then comes lungs. The passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes which finally terminate in balloon-like structure which is called alveoli. Now alveoli is a balloon-like structure which will get filled up once the air will get into it, and it is responsible for gaseous exchange. Now alveoli provides a surface where the exchange of gases can take place. Now through the surface of alveoli, gaseous exchange will happen. Now what is The gaseal exchange. Gaseal exchange is release of CO2 and absorbing carbon dioxide from the fresh air. That is termed as gaseal exchange. So whenever I'll refer to gaseal exchange, that means it happens both the ways, that it is releasing carbon dioxide, that it is removing carbon dioxide, and at this and it will absorb oxygen from the fresh air. Now how this process will happen, that we are going to learn it in this paragraph. When we will breathe in, we lift our ribs and it will flatten our diaphragm, as if you will see here, into the chest cavity. When the air will gets into it, all the parts of the lungs will get filled with the air. So this diaphragm will flatten up as this chest cavity will come down. As it will swell up with the air, it will come down and diaphragm will be flattened up. Here you can see that diaphragm is up. It will get flattened up. It will come down once the lungs will filled with the air. And chest cavity becomes larger as a result. Because of this, air is sucked into the lungs and filled the expanded alveoli. Now once the chest cavity is filled with the air, where this air will go? Air will go to alveoli. Now alveoli is a small socket and small balloon like structure which will fill with the air once we will breathe in the air. The blood brings carbon dioxide from rest of the body to release into alveoli. The blood which has been circulated into the body part, that is with the carbon dioxide, it is impure blood. So that blood also will come to the alveoli, and the oxygen in the alveolar air is taken up by the blood and alveolar blood vessel to be transported to the cell, to the body. That's why we are referring to the gaseal exchange, because it will release the carbon dioxide and it will take up the oxygen from the fresh air. So this gaseal exchange will happen in alveoli, in alveolar air. During the breathing cycle, when air is taken in and let out, the lungs always contain a residual volume of air. Now the meaning of residual volume of air is some buffer volume of air will be always there into the lungs, because it will take some time for gaseal exchange. That is, from the impure blood it will release carbon dioxide and it will again take up the oxygen. So that will take up some time. So this buffer volume of air will help lungs to pass fresh oxygen every time, so that there is a sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed for the carbon dioxide to be released. To take up the fresh oxygen and to release carbon dioxide, it will take some time. So lungs will always have some buffer volume of air, residual volume of air. And that is the reason why we can hold our breath for some seconds. And in these seconds, the lungs will use that buffer volume of the air. And instantly we will not die when we will hold our breath, because our body is using that buffer volume of the air. Body is using that oxygen which was there as a residual volume of air into the lungs. Now the pigment which is helping in this gaseal exchange is hemoglobin. The respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity for the oxygen. So once the air will come to the alveoli, this hemoglobin will attach to the oxygen. It take up the oxygen from the air in the lungs and carry it to the tissue which are deficient in oxygen before releasing it. Hemoglobin is present in red blood corpuscles, and once it will attach with the oxygen, it will make a compound like oxyhemoglobin. Then it will go to the cell which is deficient into the oxygen and it will release the oxygen into the oxygen deficient cell. Now carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than the oxygen and hence is mostly transported in dissolved form in our blood. So in blood, the water amount is there and carbon dioxide will get dissolved into the water of the blood and it will come back to lungs to get released from the nostril. Now oxygen will get attached to hemoglobin and will get transported to the required tissue. And that is how the whole respiration process will happen in our body. Now let us understand that how the purification will happen into the heart, the detail. So here we are dividing heart into two equal parts. This is left part and this is right part. Now into the left, there will be two things. That upper portion of the left is left atrium. The lower portion of the left part is left ventricle. So left atrium and left, this is left atrium and this is left ventricle. Similarly, in the right side, this is right atrium and the lower portion will be left ventricle. So there will be four chambers of the heart, two atriums, two ventricles. Left side, left atrium, left ventricle, and right side, right atrium, right ventricle. Now, one more important things we are going to learn here is pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins. We know that arteries are always getting the pure blood and veins are always getting impure blood. But here pulmonary veins getting the pure blood from the lungs. So this is an exception for the veins, that pulmonary veins are getting the pure blood from the lungs. And pulmonary arteries, they are taking impure blood from the organs to the heart. So pulmonary arteries are having the impure blood, whereas pulmonary veins are having the pure blood. Except these two, pulmonary artery and pulmonary veins, other arteries and veins functions are, the arteries are circulating oxygen rich blood and veins are taking the impure blood from organs to lungs. So these things you have to remember. Now let us get into the detail. So first we are talking about left side. So first we are talking about left atrium. So oxygen rich blood from the lungs come to the thin walled upper chamber of the heart on the left atrium. So whatever oxygen rich blood will come, that will come to left atrium. Once the blood will come, the atrium will relax and it will fill in with the blood. Once it will receive the blood, it will contract and it will push the blood out. So left atrium relaxes when it is collecting the blood and then it will contract. Once it will contract like this, it will pushes the blood out and that blood will go from atrium to ventricle. Into the diagram, as we can see, it goes from atrium to ventricle. And the left ventricle will receive that blood from the atrium. So blood flow will be from left atrium to left ventricle. Once this left ventricle will receive the blood, it will relax. So blood will come in, left ventricle will fill with the blood, then again it will contract. It will become smaller, its size will shrink. So it will push the blood out. When the muscular left ventricle contracts its turn, the blood is pumped out to the body. Now blood will pumped out to the body from the left ventricle. So what is the function of left part of the heart? That the blood, it comes from the lungs. It is oxygen rich blood. So it goes to left atrium, then it goes to left ventricle. These two parts are of the hearts. Now from hearts it will go to body parts. From left ventricle it will go to body parts. So this is the flow of the blood in left side of the heart. That it comes from the lungs. It is oxygen rich blood. It go to left atrium. Then it will go to left ventricle. And then it will circulate it to body parts. So this is the flow of the blood from lungs to the left part of the heart and to the body part. Now similarly, let us see what the right part of the heart will do. So here, deoxygenated blood comes from the body to the upper chamber of the right atrium. So this is right atrium. So blood will come from the body parts. And once it is coming from the body parts, we know it is impure, it is rich with carbon dioxide. So deoxygenated blood will come from the body parts to the right side of the heart and it will come to right atrium. It will come to right atrium. Once it will receive the blood, it will relaxes. So blood will come into it and then it will contract, it will shrink. So blood will go out. Now that blood will come to right ventricle. From right atrium to right ventricle. And from here, it will dilate. This transfer blood to right ventricle, which pumps it to the lungs for oxygenation. Now from the right ventricle, it will go to lungs because we know that it is deoxygenated blood and it requires purification. And again that blood has to contain oxygen so that it will circulate into body parts. So how the blood flow will work into the right side of the heart? That deoxygenated blood. What is the meaning of deoxygenated blood? Blood without oxygen. That will come to the right atrium of the heart. From right atrium, it will go to right ventricle. And from right ventricle, it will go to lungs for purification. So these are the parts of hearts and this will be the blood flow towards the right side of the heart. So the function of the right side of the heart and left side of the heart is completely different. Left side circulates the oxygenated blood and right side will collect the blood from the body part and it will send it to the lungs for purification. Now let us see some of the important features when oxygen will be in lungs and into the heart. The separation of right side and left side of the heart is useful to keep oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing. So these two bloods, that pure blood and impure blood, will not get mixed because of this bifurcation of right side and left side of the heart. Now what is the function? It allows a highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body. Once this impure blood will not mix with the pure blood, the purest oxygen rich blood will reach to the tissue and it will give us maximum amount of energy. This is useful in animals that have high energy need such as birds, mammals, which constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature, and for all the activities we required the energy, and that energy we are getting it from the burning of the glucose, and burning of the glucose will happen in presence of oxygen. So that's why we required oxygen at all the time. Now second important point, that in animals that do not use energy for this purpose, the body temperature depends on the temperature in environment. In our body itself will regulate the temperature. Our body temperature is not depending upon the outside environment's temperature, whereas the animal has to regulate their body temperature by their own. So such animals like amphibian and many reptiles have three-chambered heart and tolerate some of the mixing of the oxygenated and deoxygenated bloodstream, because whatever oxygen they are taking, that oxygen is not used for the maintenance body temperature, whereas our oxygen is being used in maintaining body temperature. So animals' oxygen need, those animals whose body temperature is depending upon the temperature of the environment, they do not require such a huge amount of oxygen. So they allow and they will tolerate some of the mixing of pure and impure blood because their need is less compared to us. Now in fishes, they have only two chambers in their heart and their blood is pumped to gills, is oxygenated there and passed directly to rest of the body. So when the fish will take the water, that water will go to the gills and from the gills they are taking up the oxygen. So blood will go to gills and they are taking the oxygen from there and then it will pass directly to rest of the body. Thus blood goes only once to the heart in the fish during the cycle of passage through the body because in the fish, gills are the organs who is filtering oxygen for them. So blood will go to gills and take up the oxygen and then go to body parts. So the function of heart here into the fishes are less. So that's why they have two-chambered heart. Now one important point we have to discuss here is blood pressure. The force that blood exerts against the wall of the vessel is called blood pressure. The pressure is much greater in arteries than in vein because the heart is pushing the blood to the body parts. So the pressure is much greater in arteries. Now the pressure of the blood inside the artery during ventricular systole, that is contraction, is called systolic pressure. And the pressure in artery during ventricular diastole, that is relaxation, is called diastolic pressure. So when the relaxation will be there, it is known as ventricular diastole, that is diastolic pressure. And when the contraction is there, it is known as systolic pressure and it is happening during ventricular systole. So these three names you have to remember during contraction and relaxation. The normal systolic pressure is about 120 mm of Hg and diastolic pressure is 80 mm of Hg. So these are the standard for the blood pressure, that diastolic pressure has to be 80 mm and systolic pressure has to be 120 mm. Now blood pressure is measured with an instrument called sphygmomanometer. So this also you have to remember. High blood pressure is also called hypertension and is caused by contraction of arterioles which results in increase in resistance to blood flow. So when this pressure will face some of the resistance from the arteries, then the hypertension will increase and it can lead to a rupture of artery and internal bleeding. Now blood circulation is happening through blood vessels, so they are important part of circulatory system. So first, arteries. Since the blood emerges from the heart under high pressure, these arteries have thick and elastic walls, so they will sustain with this pressure. Now veins, they are containing impure blood. They are collecting blood from the organs, body parts and they are bringing back to the heart. They do not need thick walls as the pressure is much more less into the veins. Instead, they have valves that ensure that the blood flows only in one direction and it will not go back to the organ. So it will go only in one direction. So arteries have thick walls whereas veins have valves which will restrict the flow in reverse direction. Then comes capillaries. These are smallest vessel and they have walls which are one cell thick and they will allow gaseous exchange. The material exchange between blood and surrounding cell take place across this thin wall. These capillaries then join together and form veins and convey the blood away from the organ to the tissue. And that's why they have very thin wall, one cell thick wall they'll have. In case of leakage, the blood has a platelet cell which circulate around the body and plug these leaks by helping to clot the blood at these points of injury. So when some of the cuts and wounds will be there on our skin, these platelets will help to clot the blood and it will restrict the flow of blood outside the body. Now lymph is one of the important fluid in our body. Through the pores present in the walls and capillaries, some amount of plasma, protein and blood cell will escape out from the capillaries and they will go to intercellular spaces to form this tissue or fluid. It is known as lymph because they have escaped out. This capillaries walls are very thin, so they can come out also and they'll flow into the intercellular spaces. Now lymph will carry digested and absorbed fat from intestine and drain excess fluid from extracellular space to back to the blood. So once it will come to the leaf, they have escaped out from the blood vessel to the lymph. So lymph will send them into the blood vessel back, and it also has some of the digested and absorbed fat from the intestine. Now we'll see transportation in plants. That energy needs differ between different body designs. Plants do not move, so their energy need is very less compared to animals and humans. Plant bodies have large proportion of dead cell in many tissue. As a result, plants have low energy requirement need and can use relatively slow transport system. It can be very large in plants such as very tall trees. So they have slow transport system compared to human and animal because their energy need is very less. Now how they are transporting water. So there is a steady movement of water into the root xylem, creating a column of water that is steadily pushed upward from the roots to the stem and to the leaves. At the roots, cell in contact with soil actively take up ions. This creates a difference in concentration of these ions between root and soil. Water therefore moves into root from the soil to eliminate this difference. Earlier we have seen this concept that because of the ion difference, when the roots are there into the soil underground, here the ion concentration is more. Once the root will take up this ion along with the water, into the roots ion concentration will be more and into the soil it will be less. So this difference of ion concentration will help water to go up into the roots and till the stem. So this difference of ion concentration into the roots will help water to move forward. Now third point, how will water reach till top? This ion difference will help water to go into the roots. Now how it will reach till top? The water which is lost through the stomata is replaced by water from xylem vessel into the leaf. Now when the stomata pore will open, it will also transpirate some of the water into the environment. So now leaves are having less water compared to earlier situation. So in fact, evaporation of water molecules from cell of leaf creates suction which pulls the water from xylem cell of the roots. So this transpiration pull, this pull has happened because of transpiration, because through stomata pore this water has lost and this has lost because of the transpiration. So this creates some pull, and this pull is because of the transpiration. So that's why it is known as transpiration pull, that now into the leaves the water is less, and this will create some of the suction which will pull the water from the roots and it will reach till the leaves. So this is known as transpiration pull. The loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial parts of the plant is known as transpiration. Now because of this transpiration, the water will reach from root till the shoot. And how the water will go to the root? Because of difference of ion concentration. So these are totally different process. Here difference in ion concentration will work, and here transpiration pull will work. Now what is the function of transpiration? So it helps in absorption and upward movement of water and minerals dissolved in it from roots till the leaves. In earlier slide we have seen that because of this transpiration pull, the water will reach from roots till the leaves. It also helps in temperature regulation. The effect of root pressure in transport of water is more important at night. During the day, when the stomata pore are open, the transpiration pull becomes the major driving force in the movement of water in xylem. So this movement of water, it happens because of this transpiration pull, and because of this only the water will reach till the leaves. Now transport of food. Till now we were discussing about transport of water. We have discussed the transpiration pull, ion concentration difference. Now comes the food. How food is being transported from roots till the leaves. The transport of soluble products of photosynthesis is called translocation and is occurred in part of vascular tissue known as phloem. So phloem tissue is responsible for translocation of dissolved products or the dissolved product of photosynthesis. Now what is the meaning of dissolved product of photosynthesis? The food. The leaves are preparing the food particles in presence of sunlight and carbon dioxide, and that process is photosynthesis. So soluble products of photosynthesis means whatever food particles they are preparing via photosynthesis process, that is being translocation with the help of phloem tissue. Now the phloem transports amino acid and other substance. These substances are especially delivered to storage organs of roots, fruits and seeds and to growing organs. The translocation of food and other substance take place in upward and downward direction. This happens via both the ways, that food particles will go up also and comes down also. Now translocation in phloem. Translocation happens by utilizing energy. Material like sucrose is transferred into phloem tissue using energy of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This increases the osmotic pressure of tissue, causing water to move into it. This pressure moves the material in phloem to tissue which have less pressure. We have learned about this pressure, that is osmotic pressure, which is functioning on the based on the difference of pressure. So this pressure will move from more pressure to less pressure. So the material will go to the tissue which tissue has less pressure. This allows the phloem to move material according to plant's need. So what all tissues are having very less pressure, are having very less food material into them, this phloem tissue will circulate food particles or sucrose particle to that tissue. So phloem will circulate, phloem will distribute that food particle according to their need. And how they will identify the need? They will identify this need with the help of osmotic pressure. The osmotic pressure will be less. if the sucrose level is less. That means that tissue is in highly need of the food particle or the sucrose. So phloem will distribute the sucrose particle to that tissue. For example, in spring, sugar stored in root and stem tissue would be transported to the birds which need energy to grow. So as and when they required energy, this phloem will circulate this sucrose particle to them. Now another important metabolic process in humans is excretion. So here we are going to learn the function of the kidneys and how kidney will purify our blood, and that will go out through the urinary bladder and we call it urine. So this complete function we are going to learn here. Now the kidneys will filter the blood and they will pass the uric acid, the impure uric acid, and that will pass from the ureter and it will come to urinary bladder, and from urethra it will go out from the body. So the function of the kidney is to purify the blood, and they will collect the impure material from the blood, and that is known as uric acid, which will go from ureter to urinary bladder, and from urethra it will go out. Now let us understand the detail. The urine produced in kidneys pass through the ureters into urinary bladder where it's stored until it releases through urethra. So this is a urinary bladder. It will store the urine. So urine is to filter out waste product from the blood. Nitrogenous waste such as urea or uric acid are removed from blood in the kidneys. Now, as we have seen in the respiratory tract, that alveoli are the one who is responsible for the gaseal exchange. Here the nephrons are the one who is responsible for the filtration of the blood. The basic filtration unit in kidney is a cluster of very thin walled blood capillaries. Now each capillary cluster means a collection of capillary. Number of capillaries will come together and make one cluster that is associated with a cup shape end of a coil tube is called Bowman's capsule, and this is collectively known as nephrons. These units are responsible for filtration of blood. Glucose, amino acid, salt, major amount of water are selectively reabsorbed as the urine flows along the tube. So these important materials will be there into the blood, and these materials will reabsorbed into these walls as the urine flow along this tube. The amount of water reabsorbed depends on how much excess water is there into the body, on how much dissolved waste there is to be excreted. The urine forming in each kidney eventually enter a long tube, ureter, which connects the kidney to urinary bladder. So ureter is the pipe which will take urine from kidney to the urinary bladder. Urine is stored in a urinary bladder until the pressure of the expanded bladder leads to urge to pass it through the urethra. The bladder is muscular, and so it is under nervous control, as we have discussed elsewhere. It is under nervous control, so we can keep that urge under control because it can controlled by our nervous system, and that's why we can control the urge to pass the urine. So here filtration unit is nephron and Bowman's capsule, that is called nephron. Now when the kidney is not functioning properly, then we have to perform one procedure, and that is known as dialysis. So it is also known as artificial kidneys, and artificial kidney is a device to remove nitrogenous waste product from the blood, and this process is known as dialysis. Artificial kidney contain a number of tubes with a semi-permeable lining. Suspended in a tank filled is dialysing fluid. The patient blood is passed through these tubes. During this passage, the waste product from the blood pass into dialysing fluid by diffusion and blood will get pure in this form. So this process is known as dialysis, and dialysis will be required when kidneys are not functioning well. Now organ donation. With the help of organ donation, we can save the people around us who are in need of this organ donation. In organ transplantation, the organ is surgically removed from one person. The organ has to be healthy and that person is known as organ donor, and transplanted to another person, and that person is known as recipient. Now excretion in plant. Till now we were discussing about the excretion in human, the dialysis and the organ donation, which is the important concept. Now we are talking about excretion in plant. So oxygen is a waste generated during the photosynthesis. They excrete excess water by transpiration. For other waste, so they have three types of waste. First is oxygen, then comes water, and then other types of waste. So oxygen they are releasing during photosynthesis, water they are releasing through transpiration, and other waste. Many of the tissue consist of dead cell, and that they can even lose some parts such as leaves. Many plant waste products are stored in cellular vacuoles. Waste products may be stored in leaves that fall off. So in this cellular vacuoles, they are storing this other waste products. So when the leaves will dry up and they will fall off, automatically they will get rid of this waste product. Other waste products are stored as resin and gums, especially in old xylem. Plants also excrete some waste substance into the soil around them. So these are the types and these are the ways how plants will get rid of their waste. So thank you for watching and learning with us. If you have any doubt, please comment down below. I'll see you in next video. Till then, keep learning, keep sharing, and don't forget to subscribe, Learn Yourself.